Thank you, Emily. I appreciate the introduction. And Justin, thank you so much for taking time to spend your morning with us to talk a little bit about yourself and for our members to get to meet one of our newest, relatively newer staff members to join the museum. So, Justin, with that, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Hector, and thank you, Emily. And I just want to say hello to all the members that are joining us today.
Yeah, that's great. And I know the poll question that we had was a really interesting one because I know for me, outside meant playing. We were briefly talking about this before we jumped into the broadcast. Was for me playing outside was playing in inner city, playing along the sidewalk of my parents' home, and that was like our football field. The distance from our sidewalk was the football gridiron for us. So, what about you, Justin? Were you an outdoors kid?
That's a great question. So for those that may not know me, my name is Justin Canty. I'm the Vice President of Education and Engagement. And I think back to my childhood, I was a free range child. And that basically meant that my parents let me go outside in the morning and I went up creeks and woods. I grew up in a Sierra town called Gray Eagle. It's very small. So I was really lucky and fortunate to be able to just have nature be a part of my life. But I love what you brought up about how your outdoor experience was that corridor along the sidewalk and use that as your field. I mean, for me, outdoor experiences don't have to be far off in the field. Outdoor experiences can be in your own backyard. And for me, I think it's so important that we have free range kids out there. You know, that idea that kids can go out and have some autonomy, exploring nature and learning and gaining skills on their own while they're outside. So that's the type of childhood that I had, and it definitely infused a passion for nature throughout my life and into my career.
That's great, and you bring up the term free range childhood and free range kid. I think that was definitely us too. Free range in our yard and playing in the dirt. That was definitely my experience as well. But can you talk a little bit about, and you kind of talked how it impacted your role and your career trajectory. Can you share a little bit about your role here at the museum and then the path that led you to be where you're at here, which I know is close to your 1 year anniversary from joining the San Diego Natural History Museum.
That's correct. Yeah, my 1 year anniversary will be on April 9th. So I started during the pandemic and quarantine. And in my role, I work with and oversee the education, exhibits, and volunteer departments. And there's a wonderful staff that plans and runs plans the exhibits, works with the volunteers. And I'm so lucky to work with them in a big picture capacity and think about our forward-thinking initiatives and what we're doing in the coming years. But it's a great question. Like, how did I end up in a career like this, starting out in a small town in the Sierras as a kid that you just used to be free range? You know, growing up in a place like the Sierras, it can be easy actually to take nature for granted. And for me, I enjoyed nature, but I didn't necessarily understand a lot about nature. It was just a wall of green that I like to go play in and explore in. That changed a bit when I went to college. I went to UC Santa Cruz, and I actually didn't go down the science route. I went the philosophy route, but science and philosophy have so much overlap because they're all about asking questions and thinking critically and using your own experiences and observations to answer those types of questions. So when I went to UC Santa Cruz, I finished philosophy, but then I was done with the major and I still had credit to finish up. And I had seen an advertisement for a field class at UC Santa Cruz that was all about immersive nature learning all about Santa Cruz's flora and fauna. And you had to apply. It was pretty competitive. I was really fortunate to get in my last part of college. And I had a mentor, I'll call him a mentor because I really look at him that way, named Robin Bliss Wagner. And he had learned from John Young, who's a naturalist up in Washington. And John Young has this whole curriculum about natural history that's really, it's called Kamana, but it's focused on going into the field and just observing. And when you leave the field, it's about remembering what you observed and writing it down and document it. And then you supplement with learning from field guides and whatnot. And when I was doing this, my passion was just growing because I loved nature, but as I understood more about it, I knew that this was something that sparked something inside of me that I could probably spark in other people. Um, so it's kind of funny story. I was coming to the end of college and thinking, how am I going to make this translate from philosophy to nature education? And at the end of the term, I was doing this project where we had to ask a question. And the question for me was, what are the evening patterns of mule deer? I would sit in this tree in a redwood in a meadow, and every evening I would watch the bucks and the mule deer out, and I would watch their patterns. But I was kind of far away, and I really wanted to get close. So I learned this walk called the fox walk. I ended up doing the fox walk all the way out into the middle of the field and ended up surrounded by deer. When I looked on the ground, there was a skeleton of a deer, and I had this interview for a naturalist internship. So I actually took a part of that skeleton, cleaned it all up, and brought it to my interview, which included a teaching demo with some kids. I passed the piece around and I asked the kids, what do you think it is? And they all thought that it was a skull of a deer, but it was actually the pelvis. And it was in that moment that I realized, wow, like there are things that we think we know, but then when we take a closer look or we understand more, it enlightens us in a different way. And I was lucky because after the interview, I got this job as a naturalist intern, and I worked in outdoor science schools for a few years as a teacher. And then I segued to being a director for science schools down in Santa Barbara. There's a school called Rancho Alegre. So I was with that program for a good 5 years. But as a naturalist, I was a lover of natural history museums. And so I got really interested in Santa Barbara Natural History Museum, and eventually a career opportunity opened up to run public programs. Had a great career there, went to Cal Academy in San Francisco and ran their teen programs. And then I got invited to go back to Santa Barbara, and I started a new department called Nature Education, which is all about outdoor learning experiences and how we leverage those experiences with the content in museums. Shortly after that, I ended up becoming the director of education and was there as that director for over 5 years. And just last year, I got the opportunity to come to the NAT as the vice president education and engagement. And I'm just so happy to be here. It's one of the coolest museums around. As a naturalist, someone with a naturalist background, it's something that I really love as a visitor and as an administrator.
That's great. I could see now, a young Justin, exploring nature, and then now, as you were going through your career path, and having majored in philosophy, taking that approach and sitting there almost like a naturalist and just admiring nature. Young Justin would be proud of the grown up Justin that is who we have here today. So that's one thing and I know you brought up mentoring, and was it Mr. Wagner
Yeah.
that you identified as a mentor? What kind of roles did mentors play in you finding your career or discovering what is it that you have a passion for and wanting to pursue?
Yeah, Robin as a mentor really just encouraged me to pursue the passion because I had doubts about, well, I don't have that science degree. How am I going to end up in a field like this? And he said, you have the passion for this. And when you go to opportunities like outdoor science school, just show that passion, show how much you love nature and how special it is for you to connect people to nature, as simple as that sounds. And I had another mentor in my career, Elaine Gibson. She was one of the initiators with Richard Louv that started the grassroots movement of the Children in Nature Network. And for those that may not be familiar, that's a whole movement that's gone international about connecting youth and community to nature and ways to do that. Elaine always loved to say when I'd watch her teach, nature provides the curriculum. And that's something that I've always carried with me because as educators, we might want to explain a lot, but when the actual phenomena is there for kids to learn and explore, it's so much more meaningful. And for me, that mentorship also meant how do you foster the art of kids asking questions and not just giving them an answer, but having them use their own experiences to get to their own answers. The other thing I loved about working with Elaine Gibson is that she was also a supporter of this whole idea of free range kids. And so if kids were exploring in a creek and maybe rock hopping and one might slip, instead of saying, are you okay? She would say, well, what did you learn? And when we would always get kids to come and learn with us, and instead of saying, don't do that, the word no wasn't how we frame nature experiences. We just said, make smart choices. And that's another piece of mentorship that I've carried with me throughout my career, because it's about this idea of giving kids that autonomy to make smart choices and to learn from their mistakes and to grow. And that's also how scientific thinking, really gets fostered as well. So I would say those two individuals really inspired me and put on this trajectory of this career.
Yeah, and you brought up Elaine Gibson's her connecting youth to nature, and one of the questions that one of our members has asked was, is there any suggestions that you would give to children or adolescents who may not have that access to a backyard, or like say a sidewalk to go and explore, anything that's in home or kind of in an indoor experience that can connect them
Mm.
to nature? Is there any, that's definitely like a challenging question to kind of think about when you want to connect youth to nature, who may not necessarily have access to it. Is there anything that you would suggest from your experience and from the mentors that taught you, what you would recommend?
That's a great question. I mean, nature is all around us. And like I said in the beginning, it doesn't have to be an experience out in the field. And it may not even be someone's backyard. I think about there's a community science project that Rob Dunn initiated, and it's all about documenting insect species inside your own home and how you can look closely and discover
Oh yeah.
what's living there. And when you get those opportunities to look more closely, that can also, spark that passion and that interest. Maybe that kid that finds a weird bug in their house eventually becomes an entomologist. um, I'd also say that it's important to listen, because a lot of times when we think about, enjoying nature, it might be about what you can observe, and there's also other ways to observe with your entire senses. So as a naturalist, I love birding by ear. We actually have a live program that's recorded on our distance learning part of our website, um, where we just look at 5 different birds that are in the community and listen to their vocalizations. And so, whenever you're walking in a city environment or on a sidewalk, you're likely to hear birds. And so, when you can fine tune that ability to recognize those birds by listening, then you want to learn more about them and all the other things that are surrounding maybe your urban or natural environment.
That's so cool. Yeah, no, I think those are some great recommendations. Like immediately was thinking about the different spiders that live in the corners of, the ceiling and where the walls connect, and where they intersect. So that's definitely something that I could see a lot of kids seeing that and they're listening to that and saying, you know what, yeah, I've seen one and I've seen them in the house. So taking a closer look for that. And we were talking about education, but education department is not the only role that you have, and it's not the only department that you oversee. Justin, you also have your title is VP of Education and Engagement, and engagement encompasses exhibitions and our volunteers. Is there some things that you just have loved to see, and in your past year, almost a year, any successes that you would like to share with all our members here from your time with the museum?
Yeah, I mean, starting out in a role like this during the pandemic and being remote felt daunting at first, but I can say as soon as I started engaging with all the staff, um, I realized how spectacular the team is and how much we can accomplish beyond our museum walls. Um, for exhibits, there's been a lot of activity going on behind the scenes while we've been closed. We have, today is our reopening day, and I'm really excited about that because it's also sets for the opening for our new exhibit called California Blooming. It's on the 4th floor. It's all about wildflowers that were photographed by some photographers, Rob Badger and Nita Winter, in California, and how they've been impacted by climate change. So behind the scenes, the whole exhibits team's been working on things like interpretation and setting up that show. But they've also been working on refreshing some of the exhibits that people know and love. So you go to the third floor outside the demonstration lab where they do paleo demonstrations. We have some new interpretation on our collections. If you go to our library, you'll see some new historic publications up in the mezzanine. So there's a lot going on. And the cool thing is that we're still planning things years out about future exhibits, including a Baja Peninsula exhibit in next spring that we plan to launch on that fourth floor. So that's it's a great amount of work, but the team is just so dedicated and really thoughtful, and they've just been able to accomplish a lot, even being remote. So really, I want to give a lot of credit to both education and exhibit staff.
Right.
With the education department, I hope folks have been able to see our distance learning programs. It's on our website under Learn and Explore. We've been doing live programming, we've been doing recorded programming. They're all available, and we're going to be continuing to do some format of virtual engagement, even as things settle down from the pandemic.
Wow. Yeah. No. That there's definitely a lot that has taken place behind the scenes as the museum doors were closed. But you mentioned that we're reopening. Today is our reopening day for the museum. So all of our members that are joining here today, if you would like to go visit the museum, we will be opening our doors today. And one of the questions that was asked, Justin, and I know you haven't had that much time at the museum, because you did join during the pandemic and you joined during the closures. But is there anything cool or exciting, or is there an experience that you're looking forward to taking in once the doors open to the public and we are able to allow a certain number of people in because of restrictions and capacity? What is it something that you're looking forward to experiencing once the doors open?
I'm really looking forward to seeing all of our members and visitors engage with the exhibits and enjoy the NAT, because I've come as a visitor and I've seen other visitors engage, but this will be my first opportunity to really, as a staff person, stand back and watch how people interact with exhibits or enjoy their museum experience. And the same thing goes for programming too. I look forward to the day where I can watch more of our in-person programming. I've already been so impressed with the virtual programming we've established that I'm looking forward to getting some of those in-person opportunities as we're allowed to do that.
Yeah, is there any kind of take, like the silver linings, I guess, to this past year that from when you joined the team, um, because of the pandemic and because everyone on the team was having to work from home? Is there a silver lining that you found from being working from home and joining the team, or was there any challenges that you were able to overcome and that you would share, that you would like to share with our members that are definitely interested in hearing kind of how you approach this, because it is one of the things that is unique to your role, because you
Mhm.
definitely were. I remember the day that you came to one of our very last all staff meetings before we closed, and meeting you at the in LB, uh, and it was, I could see the excitement, but I could also see that you were like your head was rolling with different ideas, and you were excited to be here. But then you could also see different, that your brain was nonstop, and that was exciting for me to see. And that was my first memories of meeting you, Justin. But from that moment, from that day, and then to where we're at now, is there any kind of things that have come because of the pandemic that you're excited about, and something like the silver lining, like I mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I could think of a couple of challenges that were there from the offset. One was with education programming. When we were getting to the school year, we knew we still wanted to be a resource for the schools, but we knew field trips were not a possibility, nor were outreach visits. So pretty quickly, we had to figure out what it was that we wanted to do and offer to schools and really the community, not just schools, but out of school time, families. Um, and what we did was we really looked at the most popular programs for field trips and said, how can we make these programs and create virtual experiences of them? So we've got the recorded tour, recorded lessons, but then there was also this need to think about how do we interact instead of just present. And that's where this idea for live programming came in. And so I got to kick off the first one with Birding by Ear, but then the staff has really taken off with exploring all sorts of natural history subjects. And there's been art programs that we've been able to do virtually. There's been behind the scenes programs. And the silver lining is that we're actually able to take people into experiences and places that we probably wouldn't be able to otherwise when they just come to the museum or we go for an outreach visit. I think about some of our school and park staff and how they worked with the paleontology department to get field footage and how they could integrate that field footage and behind the scenes footage into a program. And then the exciting silver lining about that is as we develop that for a school in the park program, we're thinking about how that can translate into a public facing program or one for schools. And so in the near future, we'll have some recorded paleo programs that take people, to the field or behind the scenes. And that's just something that I don't know if we would have been able to do with the in-person kind of trip. Um, Although I think that there's opportunities to think about that. So moving forward, it feels like virtual learning experiences are going to continue in some trajectory, even when we do in-person education. And I think that also the exciting part about that is that we're not just hitting folks in our mission region, we're going outside of county, outside of state, and even in some cases, we've had attendees from outside of the country. And so it's exciting to have that bigger impact. And that's something we want to keep exploring.
Wow, yeah, that's exciting, and you bring up moving forward and the next normal that we're gonna be in. Uh, is there one of the questions that we enjoy asking our staff here when we have them at our meetup is their department's wish list, and I know you have three different departments, so you could definitely break it up however you'd like. But are there any wish lists from the education department, from our exhibitions and our volunteers department that you're looking forward to, and what is it, what's on your wish list that you're hoping to get to, whether it's in a year from now, 2, 3, 5 years from now.
Yeah.
What is that wish list for you, Dustin?
Well, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge all of the volunteers because during this year we've had some go on hiatus, but many volunteers still continue to stay engaged, whether it's doing some at home work, doing essential activity with us, or continuing to think about virtual ways to engage. Like the Canyoneers, they've got these awesome recommended hikes every season that you can go on, and that's all because they push that forward as content. So for me, I'm looking forward for volunteers to be reactivated and to be able to start the new recruitment cycle of our next wave of volunteers for docents, canyoneers, whalers, and so forth. So we're looking forward to doing that in the early summer. With education, it goes back to what we said in the beginning, this idea of free range communities and free range youth. And for me, the long-term wish is that we can foster equitable experiences in nature, and especially, again, as we spoke about, in these urban green spaces. How can we think about our backyards, our local parks, our local canyons as corridors to experience nature? And so I think the wish list is to explore how we can use those urban green spaces as program experiences for our community. And that's going to also create new innovative programming down the line, because I know the staff is really creative in their thinking about it. And then lastly, for exhibitions, we have this great opportunity through our exhibit experiences to highlight our vision and our research. And for me, I think that making sure that we continue to have unique exhibit experiences, interpreters that you can't find anywhere else is one piece of our wish list. But as we go forward to our 150-year anniversary in 2024, there's a slew of exhibits that we're excited to move forward with. And I'm hopeful about those exhibits coming into place, including the prospect of potentially an interpretive garden that we can use for interpretation, again, to reflect the experiences of nature with what you experience in the exhibits at the building.
Yeah, well, you brought up the 150th anniversary, and it's just around the corner. I know it's something that we're all excited about. But if you can believe it, Justin, our time is up. We're we got the message from Emily saying, all right, we need to start wrapping this up. So it always leaves me wanting more and wanting to know more about our staff whenever we have these. But any last comments that you have, or any last little wisdom that you want to pass down to our members as we wrap up this conversation, Justin?
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm really eager to see how the members experience the museum. But equally important is that we want to know how you're enjoying the experiences that we're providing online. So one thing that's really helpful for us is that if you go to our distance learning page, as soon as you go there, there'll be a little window that pops up that asks for some information. We're using that to survey people that have experienced the distance learning programs. So you can tell us what you like about it, and you can give us some suggestions for what you might like to see in the future. We really value that feedback. We really value our members. So I'd like to leave on that note that we're always interested to hear from you and know how your exhibits and educational and volunteer experiences are going and how they can be improved.